So these are going to be the top decks for Legend, and the first one is going to be Control Priest. It's been on here for a while as my number one, because if you know what you're doing, it has the potential to beat pretty much every deck that isn't Relic Demon Hunter. Relic Demon Hunter is basically unwinnable if they know what they're doing. You got great healing for burn, you got great removal for aggro, you got infinite value for control with your sister Svalna, and if you want to be greedy, you can run Prison of Yogg-Saron as well for even more value, but you could definitely replace it with Shadow Word Ruin if you want. It's a totally valid replacement, especially if you have a lot of druids and paladins and stuff that you're going against. It really depends on the meta. Also, you got Disruption for combo with Dirty Rat and Theator, which is an ETC. The next deck on the list is going to be Extra Large Beast Hunter, and you can run the 30 card version. Both are pretty strong. I just think the extra large version is a bit better because you can run a secret package, which can mess up your opponent a little bit. You are less likely to draw King Crush, which means that you get more value from Faithful Companions, and you have more HP against aggressive decks like Paladin or Frost Death Knight and all those things. Overall, this deck is on this list because it has insane mid-range. It's good in the early game as well. You have crazy survivability with the Hollow Hound. This card actually just broke Hunter by making aggro decks irrelevant. And then you also have a cool OTK with King Crush and the Faithful Companions, as well as Stranglethorn Heart if needed, to beat control matchups like Priest. The next deck is Relic Demon Hunter. It is my least favorite deck to go against on ladder, and it's my least favorite class, but biases aside, this deck is fucking nuts. Yes, I'm swearing in this because they have a full Reno heal with Unleash Fel, as well as the Silver Moon Arcanist that also shuts down any aggro deck. You get crazy value with Fizzle and Relic of Phantasms, which allows your opponent to just like have to deal with multiple big boards over and over and over again. Crazy mana cheat with the Relic of Dimensions, and worst of all, if you do manage to get a really big board, you just drop Prosecutor Meltranics, and your opponent, unless they top deck removal or have it on the far left side, literally cannot deal with your board, and it is a 2-turn kill most of the time. And if that's not enough to win, you have Xylag and Artificer Zymox, plus again, extra stuff from Fizzle. The next deck on the list is going to be Totem Shaman, and this one is a little bit hit or miss for me because it can be nuts and win games on turn 5, but since it lacks draw most of the time, if your board gets wiped, I want to say 2 times, you're pretty much doomed, right? You summon a board of totems, they wipe your board, you can regain it with like a Gigant Totem and maybe 1 or 2 other things, but if they wipe that, unless you have an infused Famished Fool or you have Magatha, it's just a little bit hard to come back into the game. But it snowballs ridiculously hard and beats any slow, greedy deck like Druid pretty much 100% of the time. The next deck on the list is going to be Enrage Warrior, and this deck is good for a lot of reasons. It's pretty decent early game, especially if you can get a 1-drop minion like the Foul Egg or the Sanguine Depths. The deck really snowballs around turn 3 and 4 when you can play the Imbued Axe and get some setup, like playing the Sun Fury Champion and Embers of Strength, along with the Imbued Axe, and all of a sudden you pump all of your minions +1/+2. The Riff synergy is a lot better now after all of the buffs, so you can get a bunch of minions and pump up a bunch of minions +3/+3, and then you have 3 solid win conditions in Decimator, Olgret, Remornia, and Grommash. It's just good at every stage of the game, but it is kind of hard to play, so be careful with this one. Next one's Pure Paladin. Not much to say about this deck. It's been very strong for a long time. Obviously it was nerfed, so it's a little bit weaker, but the idea stays relatively the same. You want to play minions on the board, use Divine Shields and pumps to pressure your opponent, and then you want to win the game with the Countess, but now, because the deck's a little bit slower, you can also win the game with Horn of the Windlord, Anachronos to get rid of your opponent's minions, Leviathan is a solid thing as well, and obviously multiple free Light Rays. Next is Evolve Shaman, the slightly less consistent like cousin of the Totem Shaman, where basically they have a very similar playstyle. You want to summon totems and stuff as quickly as possible, but instead of pumping them up with like Bloodlust and the Stone Rite, you pump them up by evolving them into more powerful minions using the Convincing Disguise, as well as Primordial Wave. You can also get a couple of really big individual minions with Thing from Below, plus Blazing Transmutation, Muck Pools. Same thing goes with the Baroness Vosh and those 2 cards, but again, because you have to randomly generate the minions that they transform into, it can at times low roll you and feel bad, which is why I would recommend Totem Shaman, unless you like to live super duper dangerously. Next is going to be Skeleton Mage, and if it were just me, I would probably put this deck higher, but the stats do place this deck kind of low, which is a little bit surprising to me. I really, really like this deck. You're able to get multiple solid alibis. That means you're basically unkillable as long as Blizzards to stop big boards. Deathborn and obviously the other things that generate skeletons make Kel'Thuzad a super cool win condition, and you just I don't know how to describe it. You just have a lot of survivability and random cards that you generate throughout the game, which makes for a pretty fun, unique experience every time, but it's definitely really annoying for your opponent to play against, so use this power responsibly. The next deck on the list is going to be Death Rattle Thaddeus Druid, and the idea behind the deck is super simple. Hedge Maze on turn 3, coin or innervate out Death Blossom Wumper on turn 4 or 5 if you don't have the coin, and then go crazy with Mishmash Mosher, Thaddeus, and then make your minions immune with the Jailer. And in the nice way possible, this is probably the lowest skill deck on this entire list, so if you're a new player, this is great for you. And the entire game is determined in the mulligan. You hard mulligan for Innervate, Hedge Maze, and the Womper. If you have the coin, you don't need Innervate as much, so you can hard mulligan even more for Hedge Maze and the Womper, and you just try to win the game on turn 4. The next deck on the list is going to be Big Demon Hunter, and I will admit it is worse than Relic Demon Hunter, but it is a pretty good deck on a budget. You don't even need Fellerin, so if you don't have them, you can take them out and replace them with something else. But overall, it requires like 1 legendary, and the idea behind the deck is still pretty fun. You want to get out the Fellskill Evoker as quickly as possible to cheat out a big demon, resummon the big demons with All Fel Breaks Loose, and then maybe discover more All Fel Breaks Looses off of the Taste of Chaos, and then you just overwhelm your opponent with big stats. The last deck on this list is going to be an honorable mention, and it is Miracle Rogue. The idea behind the deck is pretty simple. You want to try to get out a big minion early with the Sinstone Graveyard, so you basically want a hard mulligan for it as well as some of your potion generating cards. So I will admit this deck, in terms of stats, doesn't seem very strong on HS Replay, but I went 12-3 with it. It feels really good if you know what you're doing, but it is a very high skill cap, difficult to play deck. So if you're a new player, even like moderately experienced, I would stay away from it. But if you're really good at the game and usually you're like Diamond or Legend anyway, consider picking this deck up because I think it can reward people for being good at the game. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the this tier list, and I will have another one coming out probably next week, and I'll probably have one coming out for the new expansion soon when all the cards are released.